Hi everyone, and welcome to Topic 9, Ethnographic Strategies. I guess ethnography is it's an approach to research. It's not really just one method, which typically has been used and associated with anthropologists, who originally were called ethnographers, with ethnos meaning sort of in ancient Greek, I guess, originally the nation, but we could think about it as any group of people within sort of some cultural boundary of sorts that has some identity. We have an identity, I guess, as researchers in research methods, because we're grouped together in certain ways. So we could be the subject of an ethnographic study if we're thinking about, I guess, writing culture. So ethnography is sort of writing the nation, but in that sense of, I guess, writing the culture of the nation. While it was an approach which was used and confined to anthropology, now it's used by a whole range of areas, and so nearly any discipline nowadays will use or utilise a little bit of ethnography somewhere in the process. And as I mentioned, ethnography is more of an approach in that it's an approach to thinking about culture and studying culture, and so and it has many methods. So I guess that's why it's sort of more like an approach in that way, that there's many ways of doing ethnography. Some of the features, I guess, are that we're going to be studying people in everyday contexts. So that could be anywhere, and as I mentioned, research methods could be one of those contexts. And a specific context might actually be the online aspect of research methods and how that operates as a cultural practice. We could draw data from a range of sources, so we could be observing, and one of the typical modes of ethnography is that classic anthropological sort of study of the thing's gone out of my participant observation. I was going to say it's gone out of my mind. Participant observation, being sort of trying to immerse oneself in a culture. The idea of going and doing field work, becoming part of the culture, and at the same time being an observer. So being sort of somewhere strangely located inside and outside at the same time. We can talk a little bit about that later. That observation could include some interviews or conversations, could be well-structured or unstructured, but I might also be thinking about other modes of collecting data. For example, observing what people do and how they relate. I could also be doing something by looking at material culture, the types of implements and tools and gadgets that a culture uses. And I might have do a range of data collection methods in that way, and I might be seeking some sort of triangulation in order to, if you like, confirm some of my hunches about things. That might be by undertaking interviews or having conversations with a number of people to get a range of understandings on a particular issue, but also might be through another method like observation, by looking at rituals, a whole range of different ways. So not just what people say, but what people do, and thinking about that as a way of thinking about ideas and seeing how they connect or disconnect. And so I guess it has, in a way, we're building a picture from the ground up, and so the data is driving our hunches and our analysis around the culture. And in that way, it's got some connections with grounded theory in the way that we're not coming in necessarily with preconceived ideas, as much as possible we're not anyway, but waiting for the culture to inform us. Often it's a small-scale enterprise, a single setting group, could even be an individual. As we'll see later on, the individual might be us. And we're going to be favouring qualitative methods rather than quantitative, but there could be a quantitative aspect to this. Economic anthropologists often do that type of work, of getting some figures in there about how an economy works, even if it's not a a monetary economy, but thinking about those things. So there are a number of features of ethnography. There are a range of issues around in ethnography that have arisen over time. One of the things I've already mentioned is this problem of the insider and outsider, which I guess is sort of not such a major thing that's discussed nowadays in ethnography. However, I guess it is that sense of, as an outsider, we can observe things that an insider may not pick up because they are inside a culture. When you're inside the culture, you have a different view of it, and you understand the emotive and sensory aspects of the culture probably in a richer way than an outsider might. So there's pros and cons for both sides, and I guess, as with a lot of research, situating ourselves is important, and being aware that an objective view isn't always going to be possible. There's issues of power, and I guess these are many and various. Just as an example, it used to be thought of the ethnographer as having power in a situation. So I'm an ethnographer, I come and I visit some remote village somewhere, and I set myself up in some relationship with people. I'm living there, I'm participating in the culture, I'm observing, and so it seems as though my gaze is the powerful one. And so it's important to remember that, because that can be the case. And, I guess colonialism, in a sense, was built on a lot of ethnography, or ethnography was built on a lot of colonial practices. So we have to be aware of this power. But at the same time, those people I'm with might be limiting what I'm observing. They may even be augmenting their practice to take power themselves around that ethnography, that observational practice. So we have to be aware, I guess, that there are power relationships in any relationship. There are power relations, and power is part of it. But in ethnography, it's a key thing to remember. And this comes also, I guess, as another aspect of representing the self and other in this, how we think about how well we can understand others and represent them in our writing is a key thing that's come through ethnography. And so there's a lot of, I guess now, there's a lot of emphasis on self-reflexivity and understanding that. And so in all these things, I guess there's always questions about the validity, interpretation and relevance of the work that we're doing. Especially relevance, I guess, in relation to the ethics of research and who is this research for, who's it benefiting, those issues we dealt with back in the ethics area. And I guess there's a whole range of ways of writing ethnography that can range from that sort of observational God's eye view of ethnography, that here's the ethnographer with the true picture meaning of things, written as if this is a fully authoritative account, through the genres which try and give voice to people, to allow readers to make their own interpretations, and many all ports in between. So there's a range of writing genres and representational genres. So I guess film is now a key representational genre for ethnography, and handing over production of that material can be part of it as well. I thought I'd just mention a couple of types of ethnography. Sensory ethnography is one which is coming into vogue, I guess, at the moment. It departs from classical participant observation and interviewing processes to open onto multiple ways of knowing that can include what's seen, that which cannot be seen and spoken, that is through other senses. And these could be the senses that are more appropriate to the question at hand, obviously defined by the ethnographer, but also open to question. And so the ethnographer's experience is going to be multisensory in this way, and the subsequent representations could be multisensory as well. So people who do research in this area can involve food, which also includes, sharing food, sharing flavours, understanding taste, understanding nutrition, smell, and the meanings around smell and scent, touch, temperature, pain, a whole range of aspects around that sensorium, that sort of tactile aspect, which can also incorporate work or walking, which have their own physicality to them, as well as sight and sound, which is sort of our typical way of representing and doing ethnography through writing and reading and observation. However, we can be opening ourselves in different ways to these various forms of meaning, if you like. So sensory ethnography is an interesting thing, because it can, with your research question, you can start thinking, okay, how can I open this inquiry up beyond the visual and the verbal to other aspects. Another form of ethnography which is becoming more prominent is auto ethnography. This is ethnography of the self. So this is where you describe and systematically analyse personal experience in order to understand wider cultural experience. So in this sense, autoethnography isn't about us as individuals or about me as the researcher, but it's about the culture in which I inhabit and doing work through that. So it has, I guess we both write autoethnographies, so they can be a product, but it's also a process of research. And it accommodates as researchers, our subjectivity, our emotions, the way affect is an important part of life, and it doesn't hide those things. In fact, it might bring them to the fore because they say something important about the research we're doing, the questions we're asking. So autoethnography, and it's often, this can be used in tandem with other forms of research. You might combine, for example, a discourse analysis and some autoethnography to provide 2 points of view on a culture, both an inside perspective, but also it's sort of a discourse analysis, a textual analysis that gives another view, and bring those two sort of things together. It can be, as a process, it can be retrospective, where we write about things viewed from the present but looking into the past, that epiphanies, turning points that possess some key moment that says something about cultural identity. Or I guess it can be in the present as well. It can be, not totally in the present, obviously, but it can be much more based in journaling and keeping those detailed records rather than looking back on previous experience. So there's a range of ways of thinking about how to collect data around autoethnography. And what we're always doing in autoethnography, I guess, is comparing experience with theory as well, and the experiences of others. And so we're sort of, again, this is sort of like a triangulation of methods to say something about culture as an experience thing. So it's full of thick description of personal and interpersonal experience. We're going to be looking for patterns of experience. We could be looking for aspects of storytelling. So it's going to have maybe some narrative inquiry in amongst it as well. and it's making our personal experience of culture both engaging for others to read and meaningful as well, and giving people access to it. So I guess one of the things that we could question in doing autoethnography is, who is autoethnography for? It was a method which was initially developed in order to give people who are marginalised a voice. So if we're not part of a marginalised group, I guess we have to be questioning a little bit about, well, whose voice are we now giving power to through this methodology? Why are we doing that? Are there other ways of doing this research that are better suited? It's not to rule out autoethnography for people who are from dominant groups in society, but it's just another one of those ethical aspects of the method itself. So I think that's enough for today on ethnographic practices. I've tried to keep it short, and talk to you next week. Okay, bye.